Welcome, everybody. I'd like to now call this joint board meeting to order. Nice to see everyone in person, out on the screen. Very nice. Welcome officially to this special joint board meeting for February 15th, 2022. And welcome to the trustees of both the Wiseburg Unified School District and Division Schools. Good to have everybody here. We all are all volunteers. Thank you for your time again tonight. Thank you also for joining us at home or on video. Thank you, of course, to our teachers, our staff, and our cabinet and leadership here tonight. Without any of them, none of the conversation we have. So thank you all very much. And of course, a shout out and welcome to our community. As we begin the meeting tonight, I ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Burgos. Second. However, thank you very much. Ms. Vakia, vote please.
Dr. Goldman?
Can we just, do we need a roll call vote, or we just merely say?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
So thank you also to Jen, and hello to Jennifer Morgan joining us on Zoom. Good to have you here, Jennifer, as well.
Good evening.
We now have a flag salute, and I guess we'll put a flag on the screen. Dr. Harbeck, if I could turn to you.
Hands on your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In our meeting, we have a few minutes for opening remarks, and I will turn to my colleague, Dr. Grant, president of the Division Schools, to start us out.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and aloha. I had an opportunity last week to take a one-week trip to the Big Island, and some of you remember whenever I do that, I bring back a lot of keychains. So if you would like a keychain from the Big Island, I'm gonna pass it around the basket. Just take one out and move it around, and keep an important key on that. So I'm going to give a brief report, of course, a brief snapshot of glimpse about Division Schools that the Wiseburg School District Board authorized in the spring of 2008. First of all, this is kind of impressive. Our net promoter score is above 70. Above 70, so that's incredible, especially through a pandemic. Our student wait list for admission, I checked on it yesterday. Carla says it's 790 families. The lottery is coming up on the 10th of March, and by then we expect to have 1,000 trying to get a seat at one of our high schools. Our enrollment is growing. In the coming years, it will exceed 3,000. And Wiseburg Unified School District, these schools are neighborhood and regional. We opened our new DV Connect High campus here in El Segundo last Monday. Yeah, I left the island, and it is beautiful. I got to tour it on Thursday. It's really showpiece and great for the students enrolled in that program, which is growing. And I want to make a point that our division board is staffed with local residents and members with personal knowledge of the district and the community here. Ryan was on the Wiseburg board. He has a couple, I guess he has one home left in Holy Glen. His grandkids are going to be or are going to local schools. I got here in 1953 and did the same. So there's a lot of good news around Da Vinci right now, as there has been all along the 14 or so years. And if you go visit former Superintendent Tom Johnstone, you'll see in big letters on his house in Villa Beach the words, "It's all good." Thank you.
Thanks, John. My comments are about the opportunity we have. We all share the objective of building great schools for kids. That's why we're all here. We're all volunteers with no other agenda than doing that. We're all interested in clarifying and solidifying the MOU and the FUA. We all celebrate successes and should celebrate successes both at Da Vinci, as Don just mentioned, as well as at Weisberg, and feel very proud of what we're delivering for both entities, both schools. My hopes in this session is that we begin with the end in mind, and I believe these are two ends to consider. First, overall, that our partnership, and this is at all levels, both board, cabinet, teachers, everywhere, have a renewed, positive, celebrated partnership. That's where we end. For today, I don't believe our goals are to solve anything in per se. That's just not realistic at the time we have, but that we hear each other, that we listen to each other, and we learn from each other. That we have a win-win attitude and recognize our interdependence, that the actions of one impact the other, and that by winning together, we work together, we in fact do win together. Finally, my last message and hope for us is that we seek first to understand and then to be understood. That we truly listen to and learn from each other, because if we do that, we win together, and I think we're all in it to win. So let's do that here tonight. With that said, let's move to public comments. And I think we will start, Ms. Ubaki, with comments from the public on the screen, correct? Do we have any public comments?
At this time, I do not have any public comments on the screen.
All right. Then we'll turn to public comments from the room. Any public comments? Mr. Mora, one of our current but resigning board members, or retiring rather. And Mr. Mora, your thoughts, please.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see everyone here. Just wanted to provide some historical information. I guess that's what I represent as history, right? But you know, unification in Weisberg has been talked about for 40 to 50 years. It's not a new conversation, and you know, when we took it on 20 years ago, we looked for alternatives while we were doing the unification fight, and that's how Da Vinci charters came about. The idea of providing options for our community while we unified. We then hired Dr. Wonder for 2 years to feed the school, and then Ms. Nicole Temple for a year. That was paid out of Weisberg. We helped to fix data with both Weisberg dollars and Weisberg labor. So that project was greatly done by Weisberg. And I just, again, for historical purposes, these weren't expenses that were ever reimbursed. It was Weisberg helping to seed the school. Pardon me. So Weisberg set out to pass a bond and planned and executed the building of 201 North Douglas. We passed an $87 million bond, which was then matched with a $52 million charter bond, which is the majority of what funded this high school. So most charters' biggest challenge is facilities. And Weisberg took that piece away from Da Vinci and handled it so that Da Vinci could focus on curriculum, academics, and the running of the day-to-day school. I can't stress enough to everyone how important that was to allow Matt and his team to focus just on running the school and not on going to fundraise and building a high school, which is what most charters have to do. Over time, the thinking of the charters changed. We started with just one charter, thinking that when we unified, it would convert to a traditional high school. As the charter did well, we started a second charter and a third charter. And then over time, when we did unify, the Weisberg board, I think, wisely chose to keep them charters because it allowed a lot of ability for freedom in teaching, freedom in hours, and a lot of flexibility that if had it been a unified high school, it wouldn't have happened. So it's just important to understand what we started with was definitely not what we ended with. And there was a lot of different ideas passed throughout. So some people will say you promised a traditional high school. You could probably say that some people might have said that at the beginning, but as things changed and progressed, it became more and more obvious charters were a good thing. So we kept them as charters for that reason. It's just important to understand that it was never from the beginning a set plan that didn't change throughout. Over the years, it gradually morphed into what it is today. Did we create something simple? No, we didn't. We created something unique that no one else has, to my knowledge, in the state or in the country. And so it isn't simple. And now, it becomes important for both of these boards to understand that they have to come together and figure this out. Okay. There's a time sensitivity. There's an opportunity to go for a school bond this year. And these two organizations need to be on the same page. If we're going to pass a bond in November, with money for both payday and 9 to 12. So it's really, really important that meetings happen often, and these things get ironed out as quickly as possible. And then, in a couple of years, there's a charter review. And then that becomes really, really important that these things be worked out so that we have a smooth charter review. And I didn't work this hard and this long to have this fall apart. But if these groups don't get it together, that could happen. Okay. That's the last thing I would want to see. So, the Weisburg community put in a lot of time, effort, unifying, passing bonds. They've worked at building this high school. So when the community says that they have a say, understand why they say that. It wasn't just money, it was time, effort, love, and care that helped create this high school. And so it's really important that the community understand that their best interests are being looked at when decisions are made. Again, I have a lot of confidence in this group and both groups and teams of people. And I do wish you the best in solving this. And I will miss everybody. I have my son here, so I have made other plans, but I really appreciate the time and hope that everything works well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. So we'll now move to our discussion, and this agenda has been designed to be an open conversation. We will have time goals for each subject. You can see in the agenda, there's times affiliated with it. Each member conversation with Dr. Brand and myself can hold the floor for 5 minutes. We hope we're succinct, but at 5 minutes, we'll ask you to kind of wind it down at the very most. I'll facilitate the meeting as best I can with fairness, with balanced communication, alternating who starts each subject, so we're as equitable as we can possibly be. And I hope we can learn from each other, share openly, and grow together. And as Mr. Morris said, so we can succeed into the future. So with that said, let's move to our recap of our previous joint board meeting. And this is really more than a recap, was takeaway comments or thoughts. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on our board meeting that we met in September? 5 months ago today. Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, so we're beginning with something to build on. We address
Were there any particular issues you found specific, not required, but anything in particular you felt was worthy of follow-up? Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
I wish I could give you one or two of the technical lists now.
Thank you, Brian. Dr. Wonder, yes.
Share at least one of the
folks on the webinar, is having trouble hearing. So I think we probably want to awkwardly move the mic every time the speaker is.
How do we do that? If it were handheld, we could share it. I don't know how we physically move this.
I don't know, maybe one of the tech experts can.
Yeah.
Jason, do we have an opportunity to turn this into a handheld? Or here?
You can't get to it. If I can.
Yeah, just unscrew it, maybe. Can't reach it.
I don't want to break it, but let me just put it, we'll just do this.
Do you want to come and see if you can unscrew this, then we can share it? Because I agree, that's a good point. Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard to project. Mr. Mead shared that he felt the meeting had some productive ideas and worthy of follow-up. Candidly, our purpose in that meeting more above all, I'll take it so we can then share it. Thank you. Above all was to connect and make connections. But I felt that in that meeting, actually, we came away with some productive ideas, to your point, that candidly, we've all dropped the ball on, that we could have worked on here, including more collaboration, more communication, more coordination, a survey follow-up after the meeting. So I agree with you. I thought there were some productive ideas that we can, in fact, use and should. Don't want to belabor this, but any other thoughts on the meeting last time?
Brian said, what are we gonna do about
Oh, sorry.
How much cord? Yeah.
It's all right. I can usually project anyway. Building on what Brian said, I think we should use some of our time in this meeting. Sorry, Joe, I'm knocking you down, to decide what we're going to do about it, because I think his comments are really important, and I feel the same way. And I think I understand we're all busy. I know we all have commitments. This is one of our main commitments, as we talked about volunteering in our communities. And so I'd like to figure out, maybe we can use some of this time to figure out how we do proceed to build on the ideas that we shared and the relationships that we built in the last meeting. I totally agree with what Brian said.
Mr. Banuelos, did you want to say something?
A little awkward, but we'll make it work. I'll make my comments brief. I too like the fact that we had the prior joint board meeting. I'd like for us to continue, and this is a representative sample of that. I'm particularly interested in the agenda for tonight because I think it does address some. I think this is a starting point for us to have that conversation and make actionable items. For those that maybe are online and haven't seen the agenda, I really like our topics for today. We have articulation, athletic and arts, governance, which is a very critical piece for all of us, facilities and funding, deferred maintenance, special education. I think in a single meeting, this would be hard pressed to tackle any more than those topics and items. And I think they were all discussed as well in that first board meeting, the joint board meeting. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today because these are some of the steps that we discussed and see how we can move forward in like potentially a subcommittee group. So thank you, Neil and Dr. Silvers for putting together the agenda and getting us started. Looking forward to it.
Since it's close enough to me, I will add that maybe a path forward is, since we all didn't have an opportunity to look at in depth at all the items that we had talked about in September, maybe each board could go back and look at the minutes from that meeting and the list and maybe identify some areas that each board individually would like to talk to, and then compare notes jointly and then take some action from there. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's move to our next item. And we wanted to start this meeting by recognizing we've had success in some areas, and this area is of particular importance. I'll speak for myself, to me, and I think it's of importance to literally everybody at this table, and candidly, I believe it should be, and that is articulation between WSD and DV. Dr. Silvers, take it. I think we're turning to you here for a very brief presentation. Just a few minutes.
Dr. Harbeck, thank you. Oh, you know what? As she's getting prepared, Jennifer, if you have a comment, maybe Mr. Baki, you can keep a particular eye on Jennifer if you want to have a chance. I want to make sure you're involved in the conversation.
Okay, I'll let you know for sure.
I don't think a speaker was set
And
up.
we have no sound.
Oh,
Do you have sound?
Can Jen?
no sound. Can you hear me?
Oh.
I hear you.
I can hear you, Jen. They can't hear you, but I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, Jennifer, but we can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Well, I guess we're all going to be listening now. So Dr. Harbeck.
And
take it
excuse
away.
us for standing. We're here to talk about articulation between the two schools. And, first I want to thank Dr. Johnson for her flexibility and her collaborative spirit in putting these meetings together. We started by talking about Da Vinci because Ms. Clark, our principal at Dana Middle School, asked to hear more about the pathways at the Da Vinci School. So when we speak to parents, we would be more informed. So the principals and Matt and his team came forward and gave us a great presentation on all the schools. And second, we met, I believe, about mathematics and what's going on between the two schools, particularly for our 8th grade students as they matriculate over to the high school. Our third meeting was about data. We brought in Ms. Nitzos, Ms. Clark again, our 8th grade, our Dana Middle School principal, talked about data and how we're going to have a system to bring our data over from the 8th grade to the high school for children that are coming here so that they're placed appropriately and that they're ready. All systems are go on that. So we're real happy with those meetings. We're going to continue as we look to those systems. And this is Dr. Ingram. She also wants to speak.
Hold on just one second, if I may. Dr. Wonder, I don't know what the temperature would be if we turned off the air, but it's definitely, it's really, I wonder if that's possible. Is that the sound that's kind of out there? Is that what that is?
Yeah, we're just gonna need somebody with a PhD to figure out how to work it.
Right.
It's just so hard to hear. Yes, they are indeed. In fact, why don't we let them introduce themselves as we progress here? Okay.
So this is Dr. Ingram. She is our
Yes. So I just wanted to share that Dr. Johnson and I meet regularly to help ensure that we're building a structure where the counseling and mental health supports are aligned. So for example, we've talked about best practices for crisis protocol, like suicide assessments and threat assessments. We've also met to talk about strategies related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Most recently, we talked about aligning culturally relevant practices to ensure that required reading in libraries are supportive of our students and representative of their experiences.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Peggy Mazzarella, and I'm the Director of Psychological Services for Weisburn. I think that in special education, we have worked for years together prior to my tenure coming on board. The two special education students coming from Dana and going to the high schools. And that has been really successful. I've been working this year with Lynn Rodriguez to continue the collaboration. I have the unique position of having worked as a consultant for Da Vinci. So I got to see those programs on that side, working for Allegra as her consultant. So special education, I got to see that view and from that perspective. And so I take that knowledge with me into my position as the director of special education and, to try to, see what we can do to help articulate between the two organizations. Lynn Rodriguez and I have communicated this year quite a bit to collaborate, problem solve, share resources. We had a common professional development day for the school psychologists and the speech pathologists at the start of the school year. We would like to have more of that and include teachers in the future. And we have a meeting scheduled next month to talk about articulation and really program development between the two organizations. Thank you.
Did you want to speak?
Thank you.
So I would just want to also echo the gratitude around the spirit of collaboration. I think everyone has come to every meeting with an open mind and an open heart and a real willingness to make actionable steps forward. And I would just add that in all of our articulation meetings, the through line really is just making sure that kids are experiencing a consistent level and like care of support as they move between the organizations. So, Wiseburn students are Da Vinci students. We feel that they are ours as well. And we want to make sure that the successful experiences they had in Wiseburn, they're also getting when they move over to us in high school.
Thank you. Alicia, I didn't realize you had that relationship. That's fantastic. That's wonderful.
Various endeavors in working together, but are there roadblocks or problems that you feel we could help you to solve? And if you don't feel like speaking up right now, because maybe that's a little intimidating, if you do have some of those ideas that you'd like to share with us, that would be much appreciated. And we could get them in writing, or you could send us letters, or you could let Dr. Silvers, Dr. Wonder know. But that's one of the things we'd really like to do. We really appreciate the collaboration you just discussed and would like to help if we can in some ways as well. Certainly with encouragement, but other ways as well. So thanks.
Thank you.
Joanne. Articulation is vital to our respective organizations and serves both of our organizations, right? We do not want terminal programs in Wiseburn. We do not want programs to go K through 8 and die. I would think Da Vinci would be best served with articulation as well, because your students would be best prepared to succeed at Da Vinci. One other thing that I think is very relevant to share is that I know Da Vinci is proud to share it serves so many zip codes, and that is something proud to be proud of. Wiseburn also serves dozens and dozens of zip codes, but they all come through the system. And I think what's most important is that Wiseburn, Dana students and Wiseburn students matriculating into high school are the majority of Da Vinci students. They're your number one group. They're certainly the largest constituency, and they're the number one group in addition to Mr. Moore's comments about community. So all these things come together. I'm thrilled personally, and I think the rest of the board members of all sides would agree that articulation is happening. I would emphasize, I would like to see that on steroids because it's so incredibly vital and useful for all of our students and both entities, especially because we may be facing or we know we're facing a declining market of students, right? There's a decline in ADA in all of California. If we can have students who are coming, say they love Da Vinci, they'll come to Wiseburn to get in Da Vinci, and so it just serves all of us if we articulate really well. So I just wanted to make that point. That articulation is both ways, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. You want to expand on that, Frank?
Well, I just want to make sure that there are programs that Da Vinci is articulating to Wiseburn, that children are prepared for the Wiseburn High School experience, and that there's that discussion between Da Vinci staff and Wiseburn staff.
Yes, that Wiseburn is preparing Da Vinci, students for Da Vinci, and that our Wiseburn programs are not dying when they get to Da Vinci.
Right.
Both sides win.
Right.
Win-win.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments on
Thank you.
articulation? This is not one we thought we spent a lot of time on, but we'll make sure we get the time. All right, let's move to our next item, which is athletics and arts. Anyone wish to begin this conversation?
I support both.
And that concludes our meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know if Mr. Martinez were here, he would have things to say, and I did have a moment to share with him. And he had commented on the importance of the history of athletics. He wanted to make sure that we all recognize that out of Measure CL, Wiseburn is contributing $180,000 to athletics, to the Da Vinci program, and how important athletics are, just talking athletics for a minute, to him and arguably, and I'll let the other board members speak, but to the board, to the Wiseburn board, and more importantly, to the Wiseburn community. He had asked, is there alignment on that? Do we have alignment on the importance of athletics and arts? And you're free to have your opinion, thoughts and comments.
As a 30-year homeowner in Wiseburn, I can certainly speak to how important athletics is to the community. And Da Vinci should be supporting athletics and the arts. I think we have a number of programs at Da Vinci for athletics. Maybe it would be helpful to remind the community every year, twice a year, what those programs are. I don't know if we need some sort of a committee that addresses community concerns about athletics and arts. We very well may have that already, but clearly those are both very, very important programs that should be nurtured and sustained. And I don't think anyone on the Da Vinci board would argue with that, but maybe I'm wrong.
Can you hear me all?
Yep. Oh, all right.
Hi.
Welcome, Ms. Morgan.
Could I just comment on athletics real quick?
Please do.
So yes, I would also say that athletics are critical to both organizations. I think we both advocate for that and want them in our schools. But I do, when you speak, Neil, and you say your community wants athletics and Nelson wants athletics, are you getting data from the community to make sure you're hearing the whole community on that topic? I just don't want us to be hearing only one side, that we're being fair to the entire community and hearing from everyone. You know, that goes for arts, that goes for immersion language, you know, all these things. So what is Wiseburn doing to hear from the whole Wiseburn community?
So the question you're raising is to make sure we have a balanced input.
Right. I think that's critical.
Maybe the question could be phrased as engaged the whole community with what their expectations are for athletics and arts programs. And maybe we're meeting a lot of those expectations now. And we don't know it because we haven't surveyed the community or parents specifically on what those needs and desires are.
I have a few comments as well on athletics. I think the athletics programs for years we've heard, and they are very, very important to the community, and it's not just one individual. In fact, that was one of the founding principles of the authorization for Da Vinci charters in the schools. It's in our Magna Carta. It's in our MOU. So I don't think anybody's questioning the importance of it. I will remind everyone or share, let me rephrase that. Let me share that when we started, Wiseburn did contribute $125,000 as seed funds to start the athletics programs. As the programs continue to evolve because the schools are just being established, we made a commitment to contribute up to $180,000 per year for Measure CL funds. That was comments that we received from the community many, many years ago, and that has not changed. But I do like the suggestion about doing a survey, Brian. I think we should always check again, right? Make sure that we're in alignment with those things. And did the interest in a certain type of sport change? I mean, the details would come out in the collaborative survey that we can certainly send out. I would be very supportive of that, of course. One of the things that we did, I think, lose in terms of our internal connection, possibly as an action item for us, is in our agreement, we have that the programs will be run and administered by the Da Vinci athletic director hired by Da Vinci. But that person will be supervised by the Weisburn deputy superintendent. When Chris Jones left the district for one reason or other, we lost that connectivity. So we also haven't seen as much of the connection as to what is happening in our community with sports. We need to reestablish that and assign our Weisburn deputy superintendent, where the athletic director is giving direct reports and updates and involved, so we can work together to really promote the sports within the community. That was our intent. But things change over the last, let's just say 5 years or 10 years that we established that. I think it's an opportunity for us to revisit that and create some of that connection, because the Weisburn community is funding those athletics, and that's through the Measure CL. And as far as I'm concerned, we're going to continue to do that. I mean, they're incredibly important. I'd like to see us continue, maybe make that as a subcommittee for sports. I think someone else mentioned that as well, and having some joint meetings or a working group for sports. And with that, it's also visual and performing arts. Look at where we're at today, right? I think they're equally as important. The topic is centered around that because that's what we were talking about. But they're in my mind, they're both linked and they're both together.
I think it would be helpful to let the community know what we have accomplished in those areas, before any kind of survey is done. So there's some education around what kind of programs we've developed. And your comment about the deputy superintendent, I think is well taken, and it kind of dovetails into the concept of, we created this document many years ago. Maybe there's some augmentations to it that we need to do. Maybe the deputy superintendent is the right person. Maybe there's another role. Maybe there's another oversight model we should consider. But we should look at that.
Agree.
Yeah.
Whoever wishes to speak.
Thanks. I think we're going to find the two boards are in vigorous agreement on this topic. I think all of us as individuals see the value of athletics and art. I think particularly for young people, being on the same team as other people, it's sometimes one of their first experiences of cooperating and learning how to work with other people. It's critically important. This year, more than ever, it is the 50th anniversary of Title IX. So I think particularly in terms of when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion in all things, sports is one of those areas where it is, you can see it firsthand and you learn to work with people who maybe are from a different background to you. So just from my opinion, both art and athletics, incredibly important, but I do think you're going to find the two boards are in agreement on this.
Thank you.
Wish to speak?
Yep. You're next. So I don't think I'm in the same space as everyone else who's spoken before. Now, I got here in 1953, as some of you know. In 1954, Little League Baseball started in the United States of America. I played that first year. The dads built a field where the big houses are across from Juan Cabrillo back then. And I played for 5 years before I went to Hawthorne High. And I've been a big sports fan all my life, both as a participant and a spectator. Spend a lot of money and a lot of my time following football, basketball, and baseball. And think they're very important. When I arrived here this afternoon for a meeting with Carla, our baseball team was just getting on the bus to leave for a game. We belong to CIF here, which means you have to have 7 sports for girls and 7 sports for boys. But my main goal here is to have students develop into good citizens, to have great careers and happy lives. And I know the things that we're doing here centered around academics are what's going to lead to that, not whether they play certain sports, which they can do, as well as the arts on the side. I'm a big backer of the arts ever since the Kaleidoscope program that was the #1 program here when I was superintendent out in the desert. Arts and sports are a big part of my life, but the goal here is let's get kids into careers. Let's get them happy lives. Let's keep them debt-free with their families and supplement these other things as we can. Our main focus needs to be on academics. It's working for us. Look at the results we've achieved. And you could give it lip service and how wonderful and everything is balanced, but there's only so much time in the day. And when push comes to shove, I want to spend that time on robotics and academics, the things that will make a difference in their lives, not whether they played 3 or 4 years of baseball like I did. That didn't end up changing my trajectory whatsoever. So have a different point of view than the rest of you who've spoken. Goes to you, Matt. I'm not going to throw it.
Just wanted to share some quick data. So would acknowledge with regard to athletics, I think given all that has happened, we had a slow start rolling it out. And I think we are rolling now. I think we have the right people in the right positions. And I think our greatest number is we have 467 student athletes. So I agree with Mrs. Morgan that surveys are important, but I bet all 467 students who would say this is really important to them and it's going really well. And that doesn't mean things are perfect, but all schools are trying to grow and get better, continuous improvement. We have 15 varsity sports, 12 are CIF. Thanks to Vicente and DR, our newish athletic director, we're moving to an even more competitive league next year. And if you look on, this is out of my element because it's Instagram and I barely know what I'm talking about, but there are lots of pictures and there are lots of things to share success. Our kids are getting into CIF playoffs. So I'm of a belief that there's room for both and keeping balance is important. We also are putting our money where our mouth is. So Roger is absolutely correct that Weisburn has contributed through Measure CL, but way back in the day, 180,000. And Da Vinci has invested this year of a budget's just a little shy of 440,000. So investments are being made. I'll pass it to my partner here to kind of share on VAPA.
Yeah, so I think what Joe said is really important. I think we want the same things. And at Da Vinci, we offer a robust number of courses in the visual arts in particular. I went through the master schedule today, so many courses offered at all of our schools, along with seminars too, even in music appreciation, I noted across the schools. Of course, we have studio orchestra, which is again, another great collaboration with Weisburn and Toby Harwell's partnership with us, which is terrific. And then at the beginning of the year, we had a meeting with our Weisburn partners regarding continuing to add to the arts program, particularly in performing arts. And I think I see Ann Tittle back there too, who was also part of that great meeting. And we sort of paused on that with COVID. There was a lot of concern around particulates being spewed in the air from choirs at that time. Do you remember? People were catching it. So we paused on that temporarily, but we'd like to revisit that conversation as case rates come back down. So good work to be done there. And then again, another sort of collaboration, Dr. Johnson is also working on an advanced studio orchestra course description. We had talked about that at the beginning of the year, but paused on it because the UC portal doesn't open until February. Now it's open. And so we're working on that advanced studio orchestra course description, Dr. Johnson and others, including Toby Harwell. So again, work being done, I think we agree, and more work to be done. So some great stuff going on and really excited to move forward in the visual and performing arts program.
What all those things are that we're doing with the community, and it would be helpful to explain where we started. Perhaps we are harmed by the fact that we kind of came out of the gate a little bit slow with respect to athletics, so we're still living with that with that as a perception, and maybe we need to be better at explaining to the community through either community meetings or mailers or some sort of targeted emails or notices or social media explaining what we're doing. It sounds like we've got a pretty robust program, not exactly where we want to be on everything, but we should probably talk about where we started, where we are now, and what our plan is for the next 2 or 3 years.
Perhaps one of our, I'm sorry, perhaps one of our action items, so we walk away from this meeting with action items, is we talk about, for this item, setting up the subcommittee. For example, at Weisberg, we have a recreational committee with members already assigned to that. They may be our members, and if we get a couple of members from the Da Vinci board or staff, probably a combination thereof, then we can move this item forward and develop a communications plan. Also, there we've talked about funding, where the dollars are going, how they're being attributed, the management of, just in athletics in general. I'll let the committee determine the full agenda, but I think what I'd like to hear from this meeting is a creative path so that we can improve that collaboration. And then those board members or committee members can make some presentations at different points in time to the Da Vinci board and the Weisberg board. Or if we stick to like a minimum a 3-month cycle for a joint board meeting, those committees can report here as well and give us all a co-update and run this like a joint board. Because I'm really looking forward to opportunities where we can be all in the same room at the same time and get that information. To me, that sounds very collaborative, where both of the staff from both sides is together presenting to this board, and we can just have a dialogue like we normally do at our board meetings. So if that's something of interest to everyone, I'd like to propose that.
I may also, just to add, it's ironic, we didn't plan these necessarily this way, but the two talk to each other. We've talked about articulation of academics. I think articulation of arts and athletics are also relevant to that conversation. So it's not just making sure, it's fabulous, these things are happening. Want to make sure that we're coordinating so that we're doing these things together. For example, I know the Ed Foundation has made a significant investment in violins in 5th grade, and that carries through to 8th grade. To what extent is that carrying through in high school? I think there's an opportunity for us to work together, as building on your idea, Roger, that we're not going to solve everything, but we have the conversation in the room. We can do a better job, and then communication becomes less of the issue. It's more we've solved the problem or created opportunities. Well, maybe having the Ed Fund work with the Da Vinci School Fund as well, and trying to develop it for K-12 for those types of supplemental revenues that we would need, for a integrated program. Thank you.
It's close.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. So I'm also a big fan of sports. I grew up in the neighborhood. I went to Lusinger. I played baseball there. I think that was a really fun experience. But I'm also a big believer in academics. And I like what Da Vinci's doing from a balancing point of view, like Dr. Wonder mentioned. So I think it's a very good idea to meet and have a committee to discuss the sports moving forward. I like what they've been doing with basketball, baseball, and volleyball. I think the one sport that I think is on the community's mind is soccer. That's the one I feel like, Weisborn has a big sports program here at the school in Dana, right? Every Saturday, there's a bunch of kids there playing soccer. My kids were in soccer. My kids are currently in the baseball leagues. And I think the community wants, I think they're looking for a soccer sport as well. And maybe that's something that we can be discussed at the committees.
All right, let's move to our next topic in the interest of progression, and that is governance. Anyone wish to begin with thoughts on governance? Ms. Morgan, you don't have to start here, but I want to make sure we bring you in.
I'm not ready to start. I'll pipe in if I have something to share. Thank you.
Perfect. You bet. Thank you. And wave violently if you want to chime in.
Wendy's got me. I know.
All right, fair enough. Good deal.
I can start.
For the record up front, I think you'll find that you guys are going to start most of these. Agenda. I think you have an idea of what you want to talk about, so we should go there.
Good, thank you, Ray. Jotted down several notes because this is an incredibly important topic for me in terms of governance, and I think it is an important topic for all of us because it's really at the heart of how we established, and I do say we because it was a joint effort, Da Vinci Schools. I've said it in the past, no one person established the schools. We're incredibly grateful to so many people. So I'm not going to mention names, but you all know who you are. Just a little bit on the governance side, because this one was obviously very personal to me with Senate Bill 126. Tremendous privilege and honor of my life to serve on the Da Vinci board at the same time with the Weisburn board. And when that Senate Bill 126 came up, that was just a terrible bill for me. Personally, maybe it was the right thing to do politically and for everybody else, but I truly enjoyed and still enjoy my time tremendously as a Weisburn board member, and I wouldn't give that up unless the community says otherwise, because as a Weisburn board member, I'm elected to the position. But Senate Bill 126 really changed our agreement, the law changed Senate Bill 126 had a huge impact on our agreement, meaning that in our agreement, the way our governance structure was that it was 4 Da Vinci board members would be elected at large and confirmed by the Weisburn board. There would be 1 Weisburn resident that would be also part of the board, but had to reside within the Weisburn boundaries. And 2 currently elected Weisburn board members would also serve on the Da Vinci board, making the 7. Senate Bill 126, although I'm not sure there's an actual full-blown legal opinion, but out of preponderance of caution, we decided that Israel Mora and I would vacate our positions on the Da Vinci board, and we elected to stay on the Weisburn board. That really changed how we governed Da Vinci Schools together with Weisburn, because that direct connection, being a part of those meetings, having the hands-on connection is no longer there, and it's not there now. So I think that is a topic that we really need to look at as to how board members are elected or appointed to serve on that board. I would like to also propose that we set up a follow-up subcommittee here, because that core agreement was the reason that we have a part of the reason that we have a 40-year agreement in the Magna Carta. Without that, we probably wouldn't have 40 years. Senate Bill 126 changed that tenor. Now, I remember when I was board president, having many direct conversations at that time when we negotiated the MOU, the Magna Carta with Chet Pipkin. And that was a very clear distinction as to why we would do that. Now with Senate Bill 126 throws this massive curveball at us. It's very different today. That was never the intent. The intent was always to be very intertwined, because Weisburn does not have, nor does not have a separate high school. Da Vinci Schools is Weisburn. I'd like to hear it in the reverse too, right? Weisburn is Da Vinci, because I think this is it. These are the schools that we've built together. And I think there's something that we lose by not having that joint connectivity and the responsibility to the community. Are there going to be disagreements? Absolutely. How do we resolve those? It's a very different dynamic, right? Because, and I'm just going to be as candid as possible, because currently with our setup right now, Weisburn board is elected. Da Vinci board members, and this is nobody in particular, are not. They're appointed without any recourse for the community for any removals if they're dissatisfied. Not, again, it's no comment on any board member, so please do not take my comments in any other way. I'm looking at it in the sense of for the future when this group is no longer here. How does the community hold us accountable for our actions on the board? for me, come this November, potentially they don't re-elect me, right? And I'm not on the board and they can choose someone else. On the Da Vinci board, it doesn't work that way. There is no recourse unless the Da Vinci board themselves chooses to remove somebody. And again, it's as candid as I can be, because I think if we never talk about these items in this fashion, we're never going to get to the core to try to resolve something. Again, it's nothing with regards to any individual. I want to keep saying that, but I am looking at it for the future as to how do we craft an agreement similar to 5 years ago when we were negotiating the initial Magna Carta with our cumulative or collective best interest at heart to preserve Da Vinci schools and preserve Weisburn and give that community a say. I agree with you, Brian. I think it's time to revisit some of these items in the Magna Carta. In fact, there's a provision in it that says every 10 years or other period, we should do that. So, I mean, things change. And I think if we don't change with those items, then we're going to continue to keep repeating some of these items. So I'd like to, I share that because governance is at the core of how we do everything here. I mean, I want to make sure that we're responsive overall to our community. And I'm going to leave it at that, but that's my opening. Sorry, right?
I will comment.
Please, we'd like to hear your voice.
I'm not sure why you're saying sorry to me, but
It's the opening. It's just an opening.
no, so I came to be on this board because of you, because of this Weisburn board. That's my understanding, right? So I live in the Weisburn district. My kids go to Dana now. My kids play at the Little League field. I see as many community members as you all do, probably more, right? That is how I'm held to the fire, right? I look them in the eyes and they say something's wrong. They all see me here. They all see me on the website. They know who I am. You guys know who I am, right? I came to be here because you wanted Weisburn representation on the board. I'm here. We should have a lot more communication. We should have a lot more collaboration. And I am that representation. Me, Joe, Jen, Raul. That's why we're here. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And the revisiting of that, Dr. Brand, you and I successfully worked that through to create the new model of how not only board members were selected, but also the restructuring of the after SB 126. So we can have success working this out. And I encourage us to continue to do that. I do want to share something that I think is inherently problematic in the model that is not people. And I think this is super important to share. There's challenges in the model that are not people, meaning you could replace, I believe, you could replace every one of us with new people and there would still be challenges that would exist. And I think we have to work through those, but I want to air this issue, and this is not, there's no blame. This is a model challenge. And let me explain. I think it's fair, and I'd love the Da Vinci folks to share this, that Da Vinci wants autonomy, or let me rephrase that. Da Vinci has authority to a large extent over Da Vinci, but seeks more autonomy. Like Weisburn kind of leave us be, let us do our thing, especially at an operational level. And I respect that feeling. I would want to do the same. I would argue Weisburn challenges, we have accountability and responsibility, but very limited authority. Does that make any sense? As elected board members, we're not elected K through 8. We're elected K through 12 to the unified school district. This is not a comment. I absolutely hear what you're saying. The challenge for us is we have elected responsibility for K through 12. Not just the people sitting in these seats, forevermore, whoever's elected to a unified school district has K through 12 responsibility. So I believe it's going to be very difficult forevermore for anybody who's in the Weisburn board seat to simply delegate and just be disconnected completely from 9 through 12. Candidly, that feels almost irresponsible. That's not that, again, no blame, no issues, just it's how do you do that? So what Roger was pointing to, and I'm going to agree with this completely, of SB 126, as I understand it and reading the document very carefully when we did,
SB 26 precluded anybody from sitting on a board of which there'd be a conflict of interest with competing interests. And thus, obviously, the two groups would not have exact interests all at the same time, although we'd like to create them as much as possible. And thus, there was a legal preclusion for staying on the board. I think one workaround, and I would like to suggest that we pursue this, is a consideration of working and we've had conversations on this for many years, revisiting SB 126 and seeing if we can get a legal carve out so that the original intent of the board having some direct influence on not a power grab, just responsible service on the Da Vinci board as it was before. I'd suggest we pursue that or look into that. Other comments and thoughts? Thank you. John.
This working over there? Here? Here. So I go back to 2008 when the Da Vinci schools were authorized by the Wiseburn School District Board. Some of us were there that night, like Brian Meath and Nelson was there, and Israel, Joanne, myself. After a long study that Matt did about charter schools, because remember, we were trying to find some alternative to Hawthorne High School, basically. The parents were frantic and not wanting to send their children there. And Matt made his report in the spring of 2008. And I believe it was in March of that year that the Wiseburn Board authorized the charter schools to get going. And there was a discussion at that time whether these schools would be independent charters or dependent charters. And we thought independent would be better because we thought we could tap into more resources and philanthropists and foundations if we were independent. And we did go that pathway. The board asked me to serve on the Da Vinci board, what came to be called Da Vinci. Because they wanted a linkage between the community and Wiseburn, and they knew I was that link, that everybody, if I'm on it, they know, okay, that's around Wiseburn. Where other people were on that board at the beginning from Ladera Heights and other places. So we kicked that off, got it started, and it has proved out to be really effective at getting resources, millions and millions of dollars every year. That's worked. Well, at that point in time, there wasn't much hope that Wiseburn was going to be able to unify. That effort was on the rocks. We had started it in 2001 before 9/11. And Tom Johnstone was able to put together a unique one-off team to come up with a solution, the only time in California history to get cooperation from Centinela Valley and the other feeder elementary districts to not oppose Wiseburn unifying. And that eventually occurred in a vote where over 90% of the people voted to secede from Centinela Valley and Hawthorne High. And then shortly thereafter, the new Wiseburn Unified School District Board asked Da Vinci to operate its high schools. And in so doing, in that act, when it shifted the high schools to Da Vinci's responsibility, it ceded the power to run those high schools. But I don't think the public really understood the implications of that. But that was given away to the Wiseburn, or to the independent charter board, which charter boards are not elected, independent boards are not elected by the general public. And so basically, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't try to run the schools of an independent charter that you've authorized. You have to be sure that the schools are meeting their responsibilities under the charter and decide if you want to authorize them again, or if you don't, then LACO will authorize them.
So you have to make that call the next time this comes up, whether you want to continue to be the authorizer or shift it over to LACO like we have with Da Vinci Rise
Mhm.
is with LACO. So there's just a lot of things here that the general public has never been informed about clearly, because like Israel said in his opening remarks, this is a one-off, the thing that the hybrid vehicle that we put together here, and people don't get it. People in El Segundo, where I live, keep saying, who's in charge over there? Is it Tom Johnstone or Matt Wonder, the police chief? So everybody, nobody gets it because it is very complicated and there's no other models you can look at. So, I mean, what was done, I think y'all at that time made the right decision. We'd been in business for 5 years. We're really starting to rock and roll, and we've just gotten better ever since then. But you just have to realize we're going to run the schools. We have the power to run the schools. We're the independent board, and you don't. And if the public doesn't like the way we run the schools and they punish you, then that's a consequence of your decision to outsource your high schools.
Where's the mic? Here it is.
Right there.
If I may, one thing to add to that, I agree with all of that. And Don, the model was having an independent board run it with SB 124, 126, with 2 members of the Weisburn board. That's how we bridge the gap. That's missing. That was the bridge. So I think that's important for everybody to know. That's the distinction, not a complaint, just a reality.
Well, that's all driven by the unions. The large urban unions want to destabilize the leadership of charter schools. And every year they have a new thing they go after. One year it's, we're not going to fund you for growth. The next year it's, if you've got anybody elected to a public office, you can't also serve on a charter board. We had hit 4 of our 7 people, and I was the only one who walked away from my elected office
Right.
to stay with Da Vinci. Okay, everybody else went back to where they were originally elected. So that's just, the unions are always not going to be willing to compete with charters. They're trying to ruin charters. They bought the legislature, they bought the governor, and it's a struggle for charters to try to maintain, and it's just going to keep coming. So that's, we're ready for that here. And so that's how we get into these fixes. They come up with crazy stuff like 126, one size fits all, and they don't see how it works out in the general public. They just don't get it, and they don't care.
And I think we have an opportunity to look at that. Joanne, you wanted to share?
Along the lines of what Don was mentioning earlier, because we are a unique, one-of-a-kind operation between the Weisburn Unified School District and the Da Vinci schools, I'm not prepared to say we gave away our rights to the high school, and I'm not prepared to say that we have to like it or lump it. Don, I don't feel that that's quite where we are. I believe that at the time we passed a bond and passed unification and funded the building of this beautiful campus along with the Da Vinci funds, that we defined a partnership that we believe in together. And that we want to have an articulation, a matriculation from K through career, as Matt put it so beautifully when he came to speak to the Weisburn board, when the Da Vinci folks came to talk about metrics and so on last week, which I really appreciate. I love that phrase, K through career. And that's what we are here to do. That's why we're all here together. That's why we've all agreed to meet, and we want to keep meeting because we do believe in each other and we do have common goals and we do intend to achieve those goals together. Weisburn, this is our high schools. we as a board are responsible as a K through 12 district, to use that term, to provide high school for our constituents, for our residents. And when we chose the Da Vinci schools to be our high school, we did that with a lot of thought and a lot of belief that we would make this work together. And that's what we're here to do. Look at all the people here. That's why we're all here together. And I agree with what Ray said. I agree with what everyone else has said at the table here, except some of the words you said, Don. I don't believe we're here to lump it. I believe we're here to work together and to cooperate, and that's why we're here.
I just want to remind everybody that when the Wiseburn School District Board went for that bond, they had no license to run a high school. Elementary district, 114 years, no license. They did that for Da Vinci, which had already started. The bond passed. Da Vinci got over $50 million to put with it. All of that was before unification didn't come about for years after that. So that was a one-off. There's two things that the Wiseburn board has done that have never been done. One was to go out for a bond for grades that they didn't cover. And two was, once a 13-year fight to unified took place and ended, they gave away the running of the high schools to an independent charter board. That's never happened. And that may be why you can't find anything like this in California, but that's what did happen.
Me? I don't know where I end up on the SB 126 workaround concept. I have some sympathies for the thought of doing it, but I'd like to talk to our board more about that. But I don't think that any kind of legislative relief from SB 126 is a panacea. I think when Roger and Israel were on the board, the governance issues were still there. They run deep. They run deeper than just having two Wiseburn board members on. And I think we need to get to more fundamental issues than just having Wiseburn board members on the Da Vinci board. So that's my comment.
Just as a point of clarification for myself, based on a comment Don just made, Wiseburn did not pursue a bond for Da Vinci. That is an inaccurate statement. We pursued a bond because the community asked us for a high school. The result of it was that this building was built, but it wasn't like we need a bond for Da Vinci. That is not what happened. The community wanted unification. We needed a high school. We didn't want to be a part of our current feeder. So we, and a lot of people here contributed to that, obviously, with regards to that, but we wanted to break that tie with the current feeder. So we took a huge risk as a K-8 to go for a bond to build a high school. It ended up being with Da Vinci and part of that partnership, but that was at the community's request and their vote to approve the bond. It wasn't specifically for Da Vinci as was phrased. So I just want to make, from my perspective, being active in the bond campaigner, that's what I campaigned for. Just want to make sure that that's also reflected.
Well, just to maybe to wrap this section up, because I think we've shared some views and obviously need the subcommittees to take this further. I want to also comment on Ray's comments of your comment of being in the community. That is interesting. That's very true. I have not thought about that. I'm gonna dwell on that. I'm also going to dwell on, if the community member is unhappy with me, as Roger suggested, as a board member, they can vote me out. But if they're unhappy with anybody who's in a non-elected board, they don't have that right, that opportunity. And I think that in itself is problematic, in that whether or not it's, I would call it candidly taxation without representation. You just don't have a voice, a direct vote So I'm going to contemplate that because yes, you probably feel the same pressures we do when you're in the community. I'm absolutely not going to negate that. And I don't know that that isn't enough. So I'm going to contemplate on that. The other thing you said I thought was right on the mark is that we don't talk enough. We simply don't talk enough. I know Joe and Joe, you guys have developed a friendship, which is fantastic. And I think we have the opportunity to do more of that. Brian, we enjoy each other. We just don't take the time to connect as much as we should. And I think we'd all win if we did that more. So I'm going to take a page out of Ray's playbook. And I know you've reached out and we need to do that better. So thank you. Let's move to our next topic, and that is facilities, funding, and finance. And we have 201 Douglas and deferred maintenance. I know deferred maintenance has been, I'm not meaning to put I want to give the opportunity for the Da Vinci folks to share this. I know deferred maintenance has been a subject of some frustration, and I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to share your perspective on that. Not required, but I'll leave that to you for a moment. Right? On the subject of deferred maintenance, I would say that Da Vinci has found funds to complete certain aspects of the school that weren't completed when the school was delivered to us. And I would like to revisit the concept of making a deferred maintenance contribution every year in light of the fact that we have spent several $1 million of Da Vinci funds. And that was a concept that we wanted to bring to you over 15 months ago when we submitted to you our proposal for a memorandum of agreement. We wanted to go over many items and we did not have the opportunity to get a response from Weisburn on that and other topics. And so like many things, there are things you would like to change in the MOU, I'm sure. Things we would like to change, including the deferred maintenance concept. And we should sit down and have a conversation about that agreement and deferred maintenance. That's all I had to say on that.
Obviously, our subtopics here are this building and deferred maintenance. We wish to make a difference.
I'd like to make a really nice comment, a little levity here on was it Friday? Steve Wallace, Brian, myself, we had a good meeting with SVA Architects regarding the Career Technology Education Project. Got some really nice concepts from SVA Architects. They've come up together with a group on the subcommittee. They've come up with an alternative location, still roughly in the same place, but it's a lower cost option due to some existing utilities. So that's a really exciting project that's going to be coming to the board presentation, I believe, here in February to the Da Vinci board and then subsequently to the Weisberg board, so everybody can see what's happening with career technology education. And that, I believe it was a $1.2 or $1.8 million grant. That's really exciting to see. Then Brian and I just on the side also had a good conversation with regards to seeing what we can do as well to move our existing soccer field forward as it's an uncompleted project. That's something that I think in our facility subcommittee we can also be talking about too. I think it'd be great to be able to finish that out and open that space for more students to use, because right now it's just inaccessible. So if there's anything we can do to continue to work together on that, of course, we want to do that.
Comments on finance?
I guess, Neil, what's your thoughts on where do we go with that? Is it the concept? No. With the concept of facilities and funding and finance, are we going to develop a subcommittee to evaluate that?
All these things are, so that what we were trying to do in this meeting, I think, was kind of share what's your perspective, where you come from, so we can hear those views and bring them to the subcommittee.
Okay.
So we're not going to solve things today, per
Right,
se, but
right.
we'll certainly try to hear. I totally respect the Brian, I totally respect the idea of we felt we spent money on something. Isn't it fair that we don't have to pay for something else? That is a reasonable
Is that a fair, I mean, I'm reducing it very simply, but just, we spent money here, so why do we have to spend money here? And I get that. That makes perfect sense to me. My challenge is the application of it. Because deferred maintenance, and I get that, I mean, again, I don't want to I totally get that. But the challenge with deferred maintenance is buildings need to be maintained. In fact, you can argue if we add more buildings, the money we've spent, they actually add to the need for deferred maintenance. So if we had tons of money coming in from other means, you know, we have what, 2% total. That's it's just not enough to cover all these things. And we're giving money from Measure CL and other things. I'm not complaining about that. I'm simply saying our reality. We have to have deferred maintenance to cover, buildings will need to be maintained, period. I think that's where, sorry? I don't disagree. I'm just, where are we getting the funds otherwise? That's the challenge. And one other thing on funding and finance that I think is relevant to share, and the challenge we have, I'll speak for myself, is that anything we spend on Da Vinci at this point from LCFF funding is coming from K through 8 funds. And we're not talking about Connect here, at least I'm not. I'm talking about 9 through 12, the high schools. So any funds that are spent now on 201 or other are coming from K through 8 LCFF funds or other K through 8 funds. That's hard to justify from my perspective, because that's taking away from K through 8 when 9 through 12 is getting its own funds, and candidly 9 through 12 is getting more ADA per kid than K through 8. So you know, these are reasonable positions to have on all sides, but I want to make sure that we're understanding where we're coming from.
We had an MOU 5 years ago. With deferred maintenance to that, right? And we should look at what our deferred maintenance needs are and look at how we can share funds and make sure that we have funds available to rebuild and replace things as they become obsolete or need to be replaced. I'm just suggesting we have a conversation today about a building that exists today that didn't exist 5 years ago when we did this original deal.
As far as I'm concerned, if we can come up with a way to make sure that those funds are available, whether you call it deferred maintenance or something else, fantastic. That's a win for everybody. Just got to make sure that there's not a surprise 15, 20 years from now when none of us are here and there are no funds to cover these expenses.
Sure.
There's, this is the who's paid for what. I know that's a conversation every now and then. Functionally, there's some things like the maintenance of what gets replaced when. And we have in-house expertise here, right? So I think that's some of the things. And then we're spending that money, we'd argue, on deferred maintenance items. And so how does it get replenished? I think when we created this in the MOU, we were thinking of a future context. And functionally, there are some things that we need to work through that don't make any sense, but is no one's fault.
Right.
So look forward to those conversations.
And we've had repeated conversations on who pays for what, who maintains what, and it's unclear in the MOU or in the FUA. That needs to be clarified.
I don't think it's unclear. I think it's very clear that it says that Da Vinci Schools paid for all of these items. We could all take a look at it, maybe have a different interpretation of it. Which pots and how do we do it? Is it a time to revisit it? Definitely open to that. I'm not saying no. Personally, I think it's very clear. I mean, there's a 1% deferred maintenance account that Da Vinci is to contribute on a yearly basis, 1% of ADA, up to it's called a sinking fund, up to $2.5 million. Then there's a separate 2% for routine maintenance that Da Vinci is also supposed to contribute to that. If those are funds, those are already set aside, great. I mean, there's also a call in the Magna Carta for a working group to review those things and develop a maintenance schedule and review those things. I think we just need to do that, guys. Just as a general comment, we can take a look at that and develop a schedule for maintenance, budgeting. Can we create some flexibility with that? I'd like to. I mean, I'm certainly open to that. I think that's part of the conversation for that working group. I would prefer that working group to really start to dive in and make some recommendations, because if that model doesn't work anymore moving forward for a building that wasn't built then to today, I'm certainly open to revisit, Brian, and to the rest of the board. I think we can look at that.
Right, I guess my point is that for some of these things that we had to spend money on, arguably, they are deferred maintenance items that accelerated, and then that we've already paid for that fund once. And if we have to then recontribute to it, then we're paying twice. So I think we should just have a conversation about it. We're gonna have some disagreements for sure, but I think it's worth looking at and hopefully coming to some sort of agreement going forward.
Agreed. Absolutely, appreciate that as well. Any other thoughts on funding, facilities, or finance? Any questions from anyone? All right, we'll move on. Special education, the sixth item, special ed funding. This was something that was, as I understand it, and probably Roger, you can help us here, was created initially to kind of get Da Vinci going in the original contract, or to cover, maybe I should defer to you, Roger. Do you have the insights on that?
Huge challenge. In terms of just the complexity of special education. There's even an exhibit in our agreement that specifically talks about, and there's several components of that, in particular where Wiseman would also contribute or pay for services for students 18 to 21 or 22 years old, because of the way charter school funding worked. I am not an expert on special education, so I would refer that to a subcommittee. We can take a look at that, Neil. But there is an agreement as well where Wiseman contributes a certain portion of it for special education for those age groups. And then, of course, with the lion's share being through Da Vinci for the students. And then I think it's really important in terms of the designations, who is entitled to that. And that's part of like working together as Wiseman identifies students from the K-8 side for special needs or IEPs and things like that. We really have to take a strong, hard look at those and recognize that whatever we designate, Da Vinci inherits. So obviously we want to do the right thing for all our kids, and if they have those needs, we'll provide those services. But we have to be cognizant of costs and potentially costs that we pass along, right? And we have a process. Maybe we can review that process as to how we do that. It's just such a complicated topic. It's not a one size fits all with special education. There's so many different needs. But there is information as a full exhibit in the Magna Carta that I think would guide as a guide, at least for what I understand it. It's not all inclusive, I'm sure. There's so many different components to that. So that's all. That's what I can offer.
Dr. Silvers, we'll just turn it to you.
I'll just say real briefly, I think the question that comes to mind is when you have two organizations that are the same size and there's an algorithm or an allocation model of funding for special education in one organization, the 912 organization, is it still fair or equitable, I guess is probably a better word, to ask a K-8 to pay for special education services for a 912 that receives funding, federal funding and state funding.
I think that was a simple question. Again, goes back to all funding issues. Is K through 8. Is it appropriate to use K-8 funds for 9 through 12? Subcommittee needs to review this together.
It's just like any relationship. Money is at the root of all evil.
If it's a sports organization, if it's an educational organization, money matters. And what you do with the money matters. How you accumulate the money matters, and how you spend the money matters. There's laws that surround these responsibilities. We have agreements that currently define these responsibilities. Just like we have an independent charter that defines how the boards work together. So I think we need to realize that we have perhaps to be flexible in these definitions in order to be able to work together and in order to be able to support our communities and our students. And I think that we really need to work on these items. These are the root of our governance problems, I think. Some of it is organizational, as Neil described, but a lot of it is financial. And I think if we can handle these, and if we can come to agreements on these that allow us to work together comfortably, I think we'll go a long way in our governance as well.
Thank you. So at this point, with no other comment on special ed, we're at the other item on our agenda, and I believe we're right on time. Are there any other items anybody wants to wish up and to bring up? Anything that we should be exploring in a subcommittee that we feel has not been mentioned or is worthy of conversation? I'm sorry you're having to do this bend over thing, Joanne.
I guess what I want to say is something positive and something encouraging. And that is if this was easy, we wouldn't be here sitting together tonight in a large group of folks trying to work together. If this was easy or obvious or already done, we'd go home and watch the Olympics or whatever else is going on this evening. But it's not easy and it's not obvious. And so we have to ask ourselves if we really want to solve these problems. Do we really want to work together? And I can answer that for myself. Yes, I do want to solve these problems. Yes, I do want to work together. I have a tremendous amount of respect for everyone in this room, on the who's watching us tonight. And I think we have respect for each other. And I want to take that forward and put these committees together and have these hard conversations. There's nothing wrong with a hard conversation. That's what's fun. That's what makes it challenging. That's what allows you to make progress, is by solving hard problems. So I don't want to go away from here feeling bad about myself or feeling bad about each other or anyone else in this room, because I really believe everyone who's here is here for the right reason, is here to solve these problems, here to work for our kids, here to work for our communities. And I respect that on all sides, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'd like to follow up or echo a little bit of what Joanne just said. I think it's very appropriate, Joanne. I remember when we were starting out to develop the MOU, the Magna Carta. I remember asking, like, where has this been done before? Is there a model? Is there a template? Is there something that we can look to, use to as a guide? Constant response that we got is this has never been done before. So anything that's in that Magna Carta, I mean, we both Da Vinci Weisbrand, we created it, right? Is it perfect? No, right? Back then, I mean, I think we took an opportunity to a certain extent. We jointly took a risk, and we bravely made some decisions and invested in each other to move our partnership forward. Is this an opportunity now to revisit some of those items? I think it is, right? And there's nothing wrong, in my mind, there's nothing wrong with doing that. We're 5 years in, I think it was to 2016 or so when we executed the Magna Carta. We're right around that time. Let's revisit some of those items. And if they don't work for one or both of the parties, let's talk about those. So I'm really excited about that subcommittee work, because that's really when we could get into like some of those nuts and bolts and talk about creative solutions. Because just because there's no statute or law that says we can or can't do some of these items, doesn't mean that we can't come to an agreement as to how we're going to implement it. Obviously, we're not going to do anything illegal or things like that. But if there's a workaround, something that works for both of our organizations, I would ask us that we put all those items on the table and figure out if it works for us. And just be very open, have these hard, difficult conversations. And who knows, maybe some of them won't be as difficult. And we move on.
I think Joanne said it was, similar to a marriage between the two organizations, and every marriage is not perfect, and there's lots of disagreements and lots of things you don't necessarily see eye to eye on, but for a marriage to be successful, you have to agree on the big items. And I'm optimistic that we can agree on the big items. We may have some skirmishes over deferred maintenance things or articulation on arts or something like that, but not that those are small things, but I'm optimistic that we can align on the big things and work successfully together.
Don?
I'm maybe not as optimistic as everyone is, because 15 months ago, Derek Boston and Brian Meese prepared a list of items that need to be changed in the documents. And it's exciting. We're all talking about sitting down in small groups now, 1-on-1 or 2-on-2s to do it. What happened the last 15 months? Why didn't those things get addressed? Why have we let a year and a quarter go by with these things not dealt with? I don't understand what takes so long, how process gets so bogged down that there can be no product or boxes checked from it. There's just nothing been happening with this stuff. We went with a couple of professors from Pepperdine to help straighten the thing out. They didn't, but now tonight, we're all excited. We're going to have these meetings and talk about these things. This should have been done a long time ago, and it wasn't. And it wasn't because Da Vinci wasn't ready. They submitted the paper. Matt was told, yeah, we're going to get our response to you in the next week. 15 months later, there's no response tonight. So I'm not so optimistic. Let's see if we really act like we talk.
I do not feel like we need to be chastised. I think we need to be encouraged. If we weren't able to accomplish it, it's probably the fault of everyone in this room. And I would like to make progress. I don't feel like I need to be reprimanded. I feel like I need to be encouraged, and I want to encourage the people here. I do not appreciate a reprimand.
Well, the record does, Dawn. The record was that you and I met and decided, because tensions were so high, we would actually engage the process of having a third-party consultants come in, and we did that. And we all participated in that, and we took the path that this would take us forward. I completely agree. It didn't take us forward, but we needed to let cooler heads prevail. We were all at a difficult time. I think we're now at a time that we have the opportunity to work forward. I hope you'll be part of that, Don. I believe the rest of us wish to be so. I certainly do. And I also will ask everyone, I'll make a request of us all, that we have this moment forward. Dwelling on the past and what we did or didn't do candidly gets us nowhere. Let's talk about where we're going from here, and let's work together to make it a successful, productive move forward. With that said, we've moved to our final closing. Oh, thank you, Brian.
I will say that I share Don's frustration because I participated in many hours in trying to prepare that document, but I want us to move forward and move collaboratively together. I'm ever hopeful. I've worked with all of the Wiseburn board members except for Neil, and Neil and I have talked that even though we didn't serve on the board together, we served in other capacities together. I know you all have the best interests of the students of Wiseburn at heart, and with that, I want to see us move forward proactively from here.
Thank you. Leadership from either your perspective, anything you'd like to add before we close out tonight and wrap up?
I
think they're passing. Okay. All right. So we do have follow-up
we had designated that we would follow up and have subcommittee meetings. I think some additional ideas have come up tonight. I'm not sure this is the moment to figure out what those are. I would ask that within the next week, we do come to a conclusion as to what the subcommittees are and reach out. I'm open to suggestions here, guys. Topic, maybe next meeting. Revisit the September committee, the wall chart, if you will. The wall chart, Yeah. and the minutes therein. We also had minutes from that meeting. Copy of. I'm sure everyone-
Sorry. I just wanted to make sure that those of us who are here tonight have really firsthand experience of what we've talked about and what, yes. And make sure that somehow the importance of what was discussed and the emotion that was shared, as well as the facts that were shared, are conveyed to our colleagues. Because as we leave with an urgency here to work together, we want to make sure that all of our boards, that the entire boards, whatever, share the urgency and the encouragement, I guess, to go forward. So that was my only comment.
Action steps, do we want to set up subcommittees now? Or like 4 items or so, like, let's say athletics, governance, facilities, and special education. I believe an articulation subcommittee or the team's already working on that. I don't know if we want to do that as well, but
I think we should identify.
we can identify it, send it.
Not having all board members here.
Okay.
I'd like to go back and then have everybody decide.
I agree.
Who they want to have
I agree.
on those committees.
So if we can do that, I would suggest to move it forward. Dr. Silvers, when's our next board meeting? So maybe if we can have that on the agenda for the Wiseburn board meeting to designate subcommittee members for at least these 4 items, or discuss a list if we want to add some other ones to that, and share that as we develop it with Da Vinci as well. And if Da Vinci would like some subcommittees as well, please let us know so that we can try to marry them up.
Would not the subcommittees be the same?
I'm not sure that they would be for each topic.
No.
There might be some
mean the
board members
members?
that want to be
So I
on
think the
different
topics
subcommittees.
that there'd be in our funding and finance or governance subcommittees that we would have board members from both groups.
Right, the subcommittees would be the same. So I want to come to an agreement what the subcommittees are going to be discussing. And then the second question is, who are the members in those subcommittees?
Well, and we have to.
Because
be
it's probably not going to
realistic.
be each.
Excuse me, Roger.
No, that's fine.
I think we have to be realistic. At this moment, we have 4 board members. I think we'll have 5 hopefully by our next board meeting. So, I mean, we're looking at 1 board member per subcommittee on the Weisberg side, and not much more than that. on the Vision side here. So if that's it, so be it. Perfect.
Okay, let's start there. Sounds good to me.
So I just had a comment, just subject to the board president's agreement. I'd like to make sure that staff is continuing to prompt us at board meetings, perhaps having an agenda item on each meeting to remind us of our shared desire to move forward on these topics. So we are held accountable for ourselves.
Maybe make it a standing agenda item. Thank you. Our last item before closing comments is next board meeting. We have in our current memorandum of understanding a 6-month, twice a year scenario. I think we obviously need more than that. I would suggest we want the subcommittees to get going and then meet again and have reports by those committees. Are there suggested timelines that we should be looking at that's realistic?
and the leadership, we're open to your suggestions here too.
I would say, given the committees, there may be different timelines for measuring success and deliverables for each topic, and that we should maybe leave those timelines to committees to decide once they're formed.
But I'm, for the committees to meet, certainly, I'm just talking about our joint board meeting. 2 months? 3 months?
It was 5 months this time, long time.
Yeah. Well, we had the January meeting that got rescheduled, but agreed, it's too long. 3 months, enough to get our committees going? All right. May. All right. All right. We wanted to end our meeting, giving everybody the opportunity to have closing comments, your opportunity. We left an incredible time of a minute per person to be as long-winded as you wish to be. Jennifer Morgan, if you're comfortable, if we can start with you, and if you want to pass and come at the end, I just want to make sure you're brought in.
Thank you. I'll just share, overall, I think I worked with Roger and Chet Pitkin and who else was with us, Roger? I mean, when we were doing the Magna Carta, and we spent Saturdays, long hours doing these documents together, and we worked well together. So I'm confident in these smaller groups, we'll find our solutions and we'll find better ways to communicate to each other and in turn communicate to our communities. I'm very optimistic we're capable of that. So I encourage us to do that. Moving forward, I think we can get it done.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us. I know how hard this is to do remotely, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Just in the interest of the microphone challenge, can we start with Mr. Meath and then just kind of go down the line?
Roger and I have already established our own subcommittee.
We already started over
We've had a
here.
good dialogue down on this end. I think I've said enough tonight, and appreciate that we got together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Similar on my end, just looking forward to the conversations to come. And as Jennifer mentioned, we've done it in the past. No reason we can't do it again. Just looking forward to the conversations.
I'd just like to say, I love the Wiseburn community. It's the only reason I'm here. I've learned to love Da Vinci, and I'm meant to be the bridge. Anybody who's still online, I encourage you to reach out to me. If you have questions or concerns, I do the same for the board, for the Wiseburn board. I'm meant to be a bridge. That's the only reason I'm here, is to bring Wiseburn concerns to Da Vinci. So I'll end with that.
Thank you. I'm going to play on your comments, Ray, that you're getting a call from me tomorrow, and we're going to do coffee or something, because we can communicate better. Jennifer, you said it beautifully. I think we have this opportunity, and I hope we can put the past in the past. Yes, we've had our challenges, but we have this opportunity moving forward. If it took us, we're here. This is where we are. There's nothing we can do about the past. It's a sunk cost. This is where we are. Let's take this opportunity and move forward.
Thank you. I like it when people do what they say they're going to do. For example, if you remember in the minutes that we reviewed earlier, Raul had a good suggestion at our last meeting 5 months ago that we would have an evaluation form on how these meetings go. My guess is we don't have that tonight. We didn't do what we said we were going to do. Before you leave here misinformed, I'd like to do a fact check on one of the things that Israel mentioned in his opening or maybe closing remarks about Wiseburn supporting Dr. Wonder's salary for the first 2 years of the operation of Da Vinci, and they never were reimbursed. I don't think that's accurate. I think Wiseburn was reimbursed by Da Vinci from the funding that it got for its startup grants. Maybe we could have Dave Wilson and Michael, our business people, review that and see what the actual facts are. But I don't think what he said is true. And I think we need to get everybody on the same page with the same memories about what has occurred here since 2007-8. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. I think, Ray and I and Rahul, we're the new guys. We're the new guys. We don't know the history. We hear it from you. We don't know everything that happened. But I think I speak for the three of us. We are dedicated to trying to make this work. This is a unique relationship. You're right. We're a charter school. We do not have a board that is elected by the residents of Wiseburn. But that's where we are different. And in order to make this work, we have to figure out how to work with each other and within the parameters of each other needs, which each other needs. So I, for one, am completely committed to this. I've loved working with the Wiseburn guys that I've worked with, one in particular. But I believe we've got something really special here. My kids have been through the education system with Da Vinci. I think this is something very special and very unique that we are bringing. And I, for one, am very committed to making this work.
I come from a family of immigrants. My father had absolutely no formal education. He had to stand in cow manure in Eastern Europe in order to keep his feet warm during World War I. I come from a family that values education and patriotism and service to community. And that's why I'm here. I was taught that as I was raised. It was infused into my system. I hope I'm passing it along to my own children. I want to work in our community. It's one of the things I have dedicated a lot of my time to and want to continue to do that. I value the folks here. I value the opportunity here to work and to serve. And I want to continue to do that. And I appreciate that folks include me in doing that. I appreciate being reelected by our community a year or so ago, and take that very seriously as a commitment to serve those constituents.
So I'm also committed to work with the Wiseburn board members. I think we all have a common goal, and I think we can make this happen. And I'm looking forward to these subcommittees that Roger mentioned. And I love living in the Wiseburn community. I've been here for 16 years, and so I'm excited. My kids are in Dana and Peter Burnett, or 138th Street now, and they're gonna go to Da Vinci. So I'm excited to. The articulation is very important to me. I would like to, get data metrics on, I see my son in the classes he has, and I would like to see, what's the data that the percentage of kids as they go into Da Vinci, where do they fall in the math and the science and the English, and that's important to me. So looking forward to working with her.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Well, thank you all for your comments, for your time. I started this by saying we're all volunteers in it for the right reasons. I believe I still hold that to be true, and we can work this out and make this productive moving forward. Any other agenda or any other items anybody wishes to share at this time? All right, well, our target was 8. It's not even 8. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good on that.